Barakatah Yahawah, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem, Racha Kudash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is, And in the days of these kings shall Yahawah of heaven set up a kingdom. This is a direct quote taken from Daniel, the second chapter. And it's pertaining to these different empires going down. And, you know, the kingdom of Yahushai / Israel being established on the earth after the rulership of these four major empires. Now, before we get started, I was just watching the video Elder Apostle re-uploaded to his channel with the, pre-Passover video that the brothers from Chicago did. And there was one point in there around the 50-something odd mark, 50, probably like around 52 minutes or so in, that the brother spoke about some Edomite-looking individual that came to the Sakari camp, and they, I guess it's, from what how he put it, just paraphrasing, that they dismissed him because of the way he looks, and it's true, if somebody comes up inquiring, and no matter what they look like, if they're inquiring, you have to give them both sides. That if they're heathens, of course they're going into captivity, but if they happen to be an Israelite that look like another nation, then they'll be all right if they're part of the elect. And if not, then they'll be in the kingdom. And what it made me also think of is how vocab, with his infiltrating ass, he knows all the differences between all the camps, all the nuances, and just the different teachings of each camp, and how he teaches that, or he says that the GOCC accepts Edomites, but they pretty much relegate them, make sure that they're not teaching anything crazy. In so many words he said it, and how he said about Great Millstone that we allow so-called white-looking people, which really are Israelites, and we don't relegate them, we don't watch over them and restrict them from teaching, because this thing is spiritual. And this is why vocab likes, GMS the most, because he figures in his mind that if he's going to have any hope, it's going to be through Great Millstone, which don't put your hope in us, but I mean, just thought that came to mind. He can come on here and say, no, you're wrong, that's not true, but, it's just a thought that crossed my mind. Anyways, I just wanted to say that because it just kind of came into mind, before I started the lesson. So what we're going to get into is the four beasts, in Daniel, and how after these four empires, then Yahushai's kingdom would be established. So before we get started, I want to hit a couple of precepts, to show you that the scriptures is what's going to stand. The scriptures say, let me just try to see if I can quote it. Scriptures say that let the Most High's words be true, but every man a liar. Because through the words of Yahawah B'Shem Yahushai is where the justification comes or the condemnation. All right, so in 2 Peter 1:19 it says, we have also a more sure word of prophecy, whereunto you do well that you take heed, as unto a light that shineth in a dark place, unto the day dawn and the day star rise in your hearts. And this is a scripture we go to a lot, because it says we have also a more sure word of prophecy. And why is that? Knowing this first, that no prophecy of the scripture is of any private interpretation. So no matter how many times, someone tries to come with something different, the scriptures say that no lie is of the truth. And any Israelite out there that's inspired by Yahawah B'Shem Yahushai can see right through, the lies and the holes that these devils try to use when they try to bring the scriptures to justify their position, which does not justify them at all, because you can see all the loopholes, all the holes that they have, that they can't cement their teachings. This is why this is why they have to inject conjecture into the scriptures. They have to take away and add. They have to supersessionism and replacement theology, the scriptures, so that they can insert themselves in there. But the truth stands alone, and we don't have to do any of those things. All right? It says, for the prophecy came not in old time by the will of man, but holy men of the Most High spake as they were moved by the Holy Spirit. And the scriptures say that the Most High gave the word. Great was the company of them that published it. So these things were written aforetime, written a long time ago, and you see them popping off all throughout the planet, as the Lord said that they would. There would be a certain period of time, which he didn't give the period of time, but he said that once you start seeing these things happening, then you know that the end is very near. So when we move from here to Daniel 2 and 45, it says, for as much as thou sawest that the stone was cast out of the mountain with our hands, and it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great power hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. And the dream is certain, because it was a vision, and the interpretation. Yeah, let me know if you can still hear me. Yeah, for some reason my computer just conked out on me. Okay, I can hear it. Yeah, the computer just went, it just started restarting. You know, it just restarted. All of a sudden, when I was at the end of this, where it says, "In the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure," all of a sudden it just said restarting computer. So the Most High is about to restart your ass, Esau. You know, because Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. So, with that being said, let's move into it. Daniel 7 is a world empire prophecy scripture. With the end of these four beasts, you know, which we, when we get into it, at the end of that, Yahawah's kingdom would be established. Now you have scholars, you have, you know, individuals out there that study the Bible, that study history, that have come to the conclusion of what these four beasts are. So the scriptures tell us that after these four beasts rule, that the Lord's kingdom would be established on the earth. And we know that the last kingdom on there was the Roman Empire. So the question would be is, why isn't Yahawah's kingdom here yet? And the reason why is because that fourth kingdom would fall and come back into power, which is somewhat gives you a little bit of a hint of that in Daniel 7, but it really brings it full circle when you go to Revelation 13, and it speaks about that particular beast, his head being wounded as it was unto death, because they fell for a long period of time. They were dormant for about 1,000 years. Then they came back into power, and that deadly wound was healed. So we're at the very end of this fourth beast. Okay? So Daniel 7:2 says, Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heavens strove upon the great sea, which is the not the Euphrates, the Mediterranean Sea. And four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. So when we jump to the 17th verse, these great beasts, which are four kings which shall arise out of the earth. In other words, there will be four kingdoms. Okay? So going back up, it says, the first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Now the first beast, right, was a combination of two. The first beast was what they call the Assyrio-Babylonian Empire, because at this time the Assyrian Empire was a force to be reckoned with. All right. Then you had the Babylonian Empire, all right, which was run by Babylonians from the beginning, but then when you get to the Neo-Babylonian Empire, you know, with Nebuchadnezzar and them, they were Assyrian stock that were ruling that particular part of the Babylonian Empire. Okay, so the first was like a lion. That's a representation of the Assyrian/Babylonian, and had eagle's wings, right? Because you have something called a griffin. When you type in a Assyrian griffin, you see this half man, half beast type thing looking like a horse with wings and a man's head, you know, which is a representation of the Assyrian Empire, and it had wings on it, right? It says, I beheld till the wings were plucked off. This was done by the Babylonian Empire, all right? And when that was done, the Babylonian Empire came into fully controlling those regions. It says, and it lifted up from the earth and made stand upon his feet as a man, right, as a lion. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe one of the symbols of Babylon is a lion, if I'm not mistaken. It says, and a man's heart was given to it. That man's heart represents wisdom, which is the representation of the top king of the Babylonian Empire, which would be Nebuchadnezzar II. All right, and the word Nebuchadnezzar means, you know, Nabu, which is the god of the Babylonians, going all the way back to Mesopotamia. And Nabu was the son of Marduk, and Marduk was their chief god, but Nabu was a protector, you know. And Nebuchadnezzar's name means Nabu, protect my eldest son. Okay, so there's a whole history behind all of that. You know, you got Nabonidus and Nebuchadnezzar, so they were giving homage to their god. That's why you see some of them being called by the name of Nabu or Nabo or whatever the case may be, in different variations. So this is a representation of the Assyrio, then Babylonian Empire. Now, when we go and I type in Assyrian Empire destroyed, it says Assyria was at the height of its power, but persistent difficulties controlling Babylonia would soon develop into a major conflict. And there was a lot of people were, you know, because the Assyrians were very oppressive, and there were a lot of revolts because people were getting tired of the bullshit, just like they're getting tired of the bullshit today. They became very tyrannical, like yum, inside joke, you know. So the people got restless and they started fighting. So it's like there was a lot of turmoil going on, you know, that caused that breaking down of the society. And the major part of it was because it was prophesied. At the end of the 7th century, the Assyrian Empire collapsed under the assault of Babylonians from southern Mesopotamia and Medes All right, newcomers who were to establish a kingdom in Iran. And pretty much you also had the Scythians that fought in these wars. You had the Persians. So there was a lot, that you had to, when keeping an empire, maintaining an empire, or conquering an empire, you had to consider a lot of options and a lot of enemies, a lot of kings, a lot of kingdoms, a lot of armies to fight, And the one that had the most power was to rule, but really the Most High was the one that gave the power for them to rule, all right, and gave them that authority. Let's see what else we have, and I think that was that was it. And there was a particular battle. Battle of Nineveh, right? The Battle of Nineveh, which is 612 BCE, determined to end Assyrian dominance in Mesopotamia. Babylonia led an alliance in an attack against the Assyrian capital, Nineveh. The city was comprehensively sacked after a 3-month siege, and Assyrian king Sinsharushkin was killed. All right, so there were different battles, but this happened to be the battle to end the Assyrian Empire. All right, with their capital city, Nineveh, which was prophesied to be destroyed. Now, going back to Daniel 7 and 5, it says, "And behold, another beast, a second like to a bear." Now, this is a representation of the Middle Persian Empire, which was an empire that was, the Medes were a dominant force. They were coming up in ranks. They were fierce. They were out there tearing shit up. They were established. But when the Persians came, the Persians were stronger than them. Pursuant to prophecy, they overcame, but they allowed them to rule jointly with them. Because that's what the Persians did. They allowed people to worship, their own beliefs, so on and so forth. So the certain empires would impose their ways upon the people, and certain empires would allow them to keep their customs, such as the Romans did. They would allow certain individuals to keep their religious beliefs as long as they didn't, try to take down, the empire. So this was the Middle Persian Empire, and it raised up itself on one side, right? Because the Medes came up first, the Persians came up later, but the Persians became greater than them. And you can read about that in Daniel, the 8th chapter. It kind of goes a little more in depth, of that, dynamic. And then you could go into the history and you could see it for yourself. And it had 3 ribs in the mouth between the teeth of it. And this is a representation, first and foremost, of the directions that they conquered. Because they came from the east, they conquered to the north, to the west, and to the south. There were 3 major empires that they conquered, and no one of them was Egypt. And there were 2 others that right now my memory is a little hazy on it, but the main part is that they came from 3 directions. All right, because when we go to Daniel 8 to show you that is also dealing with the direction, not just the empires. Daniel chapter 8 excuse me, and 4, I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward. Those are the 3 ribs. So that no beast might stand before him. Why? Because it was their time to rule. And that's it. Once a person's, time to rule is up, an empire's time to rule is up, that's it. Excuse me. There's no artillery. There's nothing that they can do in order to continue on. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. Why? Because it was their time, as prophesied, for them to rule. But he did according to his will and became great. All right? So going back, it says, and they said thus unto it, arise, devour much flesh. And they did. Because the Middle Persian Empire was a vast empire. And you can read about it if you go into the history. They give you, history on the empire. A good movie to watch is 300, because that shows you, somewhat of the power of the military of the Persians at the time, which were the dominant empire, and how it would start lunacy to war against them. And pursuant to prophecy, Xerxes would be the one to come against, Xerxes would be the one to come against the whole Greek realm, so to speak, which you had Jakes in there also. The water, my brother. Egypt, Lydians, and Babylonians, right? Should have known the Babylonians because they were the ones that they had just taken down. And I knew it was something with an L, but I couldn't, and the water brother also put it on Lydia and Egypt and Babylon. Okay, so dealing with that, let's go now to Babylon. Fall of Babylon. The Neo-Babylonian Empire, like the earlier Babylonia, was short-lived. In 539 BC, less than a century after its founding, the legendary Persian king Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon. The fall of Babylon was complete when the empire came under Persian control, because the one that did take over, it was a hostile takeover, it wasn't no war, no major war, was Darius the Mede, who worked for Cyrus the Persian, all right, and he handed over the power to Cyrus, all right. Then when we go down here, it says fall of Babylon. Let's see, is this the one? Right, the fall of Babylon denotes the end of the Neo-Babylonian Empire after it was conquered by the Achaemenid Empire in 539 BCE. Now there was one here, I don't know why it didn't show up. Right here, who was a king when they fell? Nabonidus. Now when you read the scriptures, you had Belshazzar that was there when Darius took him over. Darius the Mede took him over. And that he wasn't a king, he was a king regent or vice regent or something along those terms, which means he worked for the king, because prior to Nabonidus coming back out, he was arrested for like 10 years or something like that. He was in prison for like 10 years. And his son had vice regent power, which means he was the acting king at the time. And his father was away, on business, in wars and stuff like that, while his son was, maintaining the affairs of the kingdom. And that's when it was taken down. Nabonidus, also spelled Nabu, notice Nabu, which is the god of the so-called Babylonians. Naid, reverer of Nabu, king of Babylonia from 556 until 539 BC, when Babylon fell to Cyrus, king of Persia. Okay, so that was the first empire was Assyria, the second empire was Babylon, and that's how it fell. If you want to know more, you can do more research on it. Daniel 7:6, and after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard. Now this is dealing with Alexander the Creep, or the Great. We call him the Creep. Others, they try to use the same terminology we use. It's all right, no problem, no big deal. Because at the end of the day, like the Apostle Paul said, whether in pretense or in sincerity, Yahawah is preached. And I do therein rejoice, because the word is getting out regardless. All right? So they were the next ones that came into power. Now, in the book of Daniel, the 8th chapter, it tells you about the king of Grecia. All right? Let me see. Daniel 8:21. It says, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia, but it doesn't mention him by name. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now, who was the first king of Grecia? It was Alexander the Creep. When we go to First Maccabees, for those of you that are not familiar with it, First Maccabees 1:1 goes into the history of the Greeks. It goes into the history of the Hellenization of the nation of Israel. Hence, the reason why when we read the New Testament, it speaks, because this was prior to the New Testament. That's why in the New Testament it speaks about there's no difference between the Jew and the Greek, Why? Because they're both Israelites. It's just that one of them was conquered by the Greeks and they assimilated to the Greek culture. Others fought against it. It didn't come under the banner of the Greeks, Others, were living in certain cities that had, that were brought up speaking Greek, but they still maintained the fact that they were Israelites. So there's somewhat of a complicated history of Israel. When you read the New Testament, it seems like it's saying that the other nations can be part of this, but it's not. When you understand the history and the different variations of the history, so you can be able to distinguish between when it speaks about a Hellenista, which is a Greek-speaking Jew, or a Hellen, which is an Israelite that did not know he was an Israelite, that grew up under the customs and the language and the dietary laws of the Greek Empire. And when you understand that, then the Spirit is working with you to understand that, then you can put the complexity of the New Testament together, because the New Testament is a stumbling block to many. So it says, 1 Maccabees 1:1, and it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Kittim, right? The land of Kittim is an island. I believe that's Cyprus, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm wrong on that, Salakia, but there's an island that's right off the coast and in the Mediterranean Sea, and I believe that's Cyprus, which was ancient Kittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and the Medes. See, this was like the last battle. It says, right, as the brother put here in Acts 16:3. This is dealing with Timothy. Him would Paul have to go forth with him, and took and circumcised him, because of the Jews which were in the quarters, for they knew all that his father was a Greek. He was an Israelite that was a Greek, that grew up in those Greek customs. And his mother would not be dealing with no heathen, because his mother was a devout Jew, a devout Israelite, a devout Jewess. She would not venture to go and deal with any man of any other nation, because that's against the law. She was very devout. So was Timothy's grandmother, her mother. They were very devout. Eunice and Lois, they were very devout. So how in the hell would this devout Israelite woman go and deal with a heathen man? Think about it. So it goes back and says, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, see, because it was a Medo-Persian empire, that he reigned in his stead the first over Grecia. Who was that? Alexander, the son of Philip. Now the son of Philip, which was Philip II, I believe, that is Alexander, which they call Alexander the Great. We call him Alexander, either Alexander the Greek or Alexander the Creep. All right? And if you want to know more history, you could read about his empire and how it was, broken up, so on and so forth. So going back to Daniel, it says, and this I beheld, and lo, after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. Now these 4 wings are a representation. He had many generals. Are the Edomites, like Dr. Phil, who is trying to make a positive difference, going into slavery? Hell yeah, they're going into slavery. If they're Edomite, no. Now if they happen to be an Israelite that looks like an Edomite, they're gonna be all right. They'll be destroyed on this side unless they repent, and then they'll come back in the kingdom as born into their particular family. But if they happen to be an Edomite, you're damn right they're going into slavery. So these 4 wings of a fowl is a representation of the 4 generals, 4 major generals, because he had many generals, and his kingdom was divided into 4 specific ones, and that was Ptolemy and Seleucid, which were the most prominent ones. Then you had Cassander and Lysimachus. because Antigonus was in there, but they eventually took over his realm. You know, it says, you know, there's a complex history on that too. There's a lot of history. The beast had also four heads, yeah, because they became four. The empire was broken up. You know, it wasn't ruled like it was, you know, Elder Pastor, his page, that's GMS declaring the end. GMS declaring the end. I just posted it on the comment section. All right, so those four heads, you know, their kingdom, the kingdom of Alexander the Creep, was broken up into four parts. And when you read Daniel the 11th chapter, it tells you that, you know, his kingdom, he would not rule, you know, in other words, in so many words, his descendants would not rule. All right. It says, and dominion was given to it. Now, when we go to the Medo-Persian Empire, right? I typed in Medo-Persian Empire destroyed. And Salaki, you know, when this thing reset, it messed all my stuff up. So, how was the Persian Empire destroyed? The Persian Empire began to decline under the reign of Darius, son of Xerxes. Xerxes depleted the royal treasury with an unsuccessful campaign to invade Greece and continued with irresponsible spending. Upon returning home, Persia was eventually conquered by Alexander the Creep in 334 BC. Right, because remember, the fourth king was Xerxes, and he was the richest. But what happened was he stirred up everything against the Greek Empire, which there were many different city-states that came together to fight. So you had Jakes, you had Edomites, you had, you know, Japhetic, you know, everything was in there, you know. So when they did that, he depleted all of the resources, you know. So they were left in a bad situation because your economy dictates a lot about your empire. And there was something, I think that was later on. All right, so let's go back. So that was the next kingdom, which was the Greek Empire, right? It says the Greeks were finally defeated at the Battle of Corinth in 146 BC. Rome completely destroyed and plundered the city of Corinth as an example to other Greek cities. From this point on, Greece was ruled by Rome. Right, so 146, they fell under the hands of Rome, and then by 25 BC, they pretty much was absorbed into it because the last ruling family of the Greeks in Egypt was Ptolemy the 13th and Cleopatra the 7th, you know? And they were, the line of Cleopatra was a title. There was a line of Cleopatra, 7 of them, and they were all Edomites, so-called white people. You know, so you could understand. And you have Jake that gets upset when they portray Cleopatra in movies and pictures and all that as a so-called white woman when she was a so-called white woman, an Edomite. But they don't know the history. Or Africa, you know. They think that everybody that was ruling Africa are so-called black, but they weren't. Prior to 300 some odd BC, yeah. But after that time period, there were Edomite rulers that were ruling that region of land or that empire. All right. All right. So yeah, like I said, this kind of messed me up because I had the tabs, you know, some of these clicked, and when the whole thing reset, it kind of messed me up. But that's all right. So it says, and dominion was given to it. Why? Because it was time for the Greek Empire to rule. So we saw the decline and fall of the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Medo-Persians, you know, the Medes, the Persians, and then the Greeks took over that. It says, after this I saw in the night vision, and behold, the fourth beast. Now this fourth beast is Rome. When you go to Daniel's 2nd chapter, it breaks down the different empires that these symbols or these metals represented. Same thing with here. Now, when we go to the Romans, right? No, I'm sorry, the Greeks. We read that they were conquered by Rome. It says for the date 476 CE is often cited as the fall of the ancient Rome, and that was dealing with the Western faction of the Roman Empire, because the Eastern faction still ruled, which that was Jake, and then the Western was Jake, that took over from roughly around 96 AD after the death of Domitian, which was the last Edomite ruler. After that, those individuals happened to be Israelites that were ruling, but they were ruling under the same guise as the ancient Roman Empire, which was paganism. 325 AD, when Constantine took over the crown, his mother convinced him to make the empire Christian, which he converted to Christianity, made the empire Christian, but it was a Christian/pagan empire, because he saw a way to not only get Christians, to make more money, but also to keep his pagan buddies happy, so to speak. All right, so it was still pagan, and even to this very day, the so-called Christian, the Renaissance Christianity is nothing but a pagan religion. When you go and you delve deep into, the different things that they do and the different beliefs that they have. Yo, bro, come on, get out of here with that, man. Come some high school sweetheart. Come on, brother. We're going into the scriptures, man. We're dealing with history here. We're dealing with serious issues here, man. What are you bringing in it? What kind of question is that? Come on, man. The date 476 CE is often cited as the fall of the ancient Rome. 476 CE is most commonly cited as a date when ancient Rome fell. Right, but it goes beyond that, because before that, you have the prophecy of this head being destroyed and going under, so to speak, for 1,000 years. And most people, even scholars, even historians, don't understand that. The historians may understand of the fall, of certain emperors and all of that, but they don't understand the distinction between the Edomites and the Jakes. When they were coming into power. Now, let me see. There was something else in here. That's not it. View right here. Why was the Roman Empire destroyed? And I believe there was another empire that actually had some of these problems. But it says, why was the Roman Empire destroyed? A combination of severe inflation, which is going on right now. Severe, it's not just inflation, it's severe inflation, which is what? Hyperinflation. Barbarian invasions, debasement of the currency. And the debasement of the currency is what created these severe inflations. Because inflation is not just the rise of prices. The rise in prices for goods is the effect of the debasing of the currency. That's why you see the rise in prices. That's why you see inflation and hyperinflation, because the monetary unit being used is being devalued. It says civil wars, right? And you see that happening right now. Divisions. Yahawah said, if a nation be divided against a nation, they cannot stand. And destruction of what? Farms. Brother just sent me, I believe that was Elder Pashai, just sent me a video with the Minister of Wellness, Jordan, I forget his last name, and he pretty much was, they did a short video on the hardships that the so-called black farmers are going through. And we see, when you look at this severe inflation, barbarian invasions, debasement of the currency, civil wars, destruction of farms, something should go off in your head and say, wait a minute, these are all the same things that are going on here in America. The destruction of farms, Nathaniel Jordan, the water brother, destruction of farms, destruction of crops, destruction of cities, all forced administrators to get more taxes from people. That's what's happening right now. Yep, the Weimar Republic. And to water to you brothers for the info y'all helping me out with. The Weimar Republic collapsed like the Roman Empire after World War I. Yeah. And what was that? That collapse began with the devaluing of the money and hyperinflation. They were finished. All right, so going back to Daniel. After this I saw in the night vision, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the teeth of it. Yeah, because the devouring part is they imposed their ways. Even though, basically they conquered the people and forced the taxation of the Roman Empire upon them. Even though they allowed them to keep, their customs, they still had to pay taxes. And anyone that didn't want to fall under their authority, they would wage war against them. It says, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. Yeah, because the diversity came in the way that they set up rulers. All empires until that point set up kings and prince, and like the father and son, so on and so forth, would be the successor of the father. It wasn't set up as it was in Rome. Rome, there was an election going on where they would set up a particular man every year to be the so-called president or the Caesar or the emperor. Same thing today, but today they have 4-year terms from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns because those 10 horns was a representation of what today is called the EU, which is the European Union. It started off as the EEC, the European Economic Community. There were 6 member nations, and then there were another 6 added to it, which really those 6 really break up into 4. When you really look at UK, Ireland, and Spain and Portugal. All right, so there were really 10. Now, in the book Satan's Angels Exposed by Salem Kerbin, there was a section in there where he was speaking about this, and he showed a picture of the headquarters of the building in Brussels, Belgium for the European Union, back then the EEC. And he said within it that when it was first created, the headquarters, there were 10 flagpoles set up, in front of the building to represent those nations. Now, if you do more research, I'm sure you may be able to find it. It's hard to find that information. But nevertheless, whether that is a fact or not, the scriptures say that it was 10. And even to this day, you have a flag for the EU, which has a black background with 12 different stars. And those 12 different stars are a representation of some of the original members, which is really 10. Let's see, brother put up. The Treaty of Versailles required Germany to pay $132 billion of gold marks, 33 billion US, in reparations to cover civilian damage caused during the war. Yeah. Yep. So they got hammered. And right now America's being hammered by this constant debt, this Ibatyat. All right, so it says, I considered the horns, which were the 10 horns, which are what? European nations. And behold, there came up among them another little horn. And this little horn represents America. Just like when we read Revelation 17, it speaks about the 7, and there being an 8th head that is of the 7, meaning out of all 7 of them. Just like in this, it's the same prophecy, but it's just told a little different using different symbolisms. But if you are able to read through the lines, so to speak, you can see that it's the same exact thing going on in Revelation, the 17th chapter. before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots, because America was held, by either the Spanish or the French, and then you had the British trying to take control over it, which were the 3 major European nations that were here, which America fought against, and they've established America to be so-called American, the American Edomite, and pushed out the British, the Spanish, and the French. It says, and behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, which is a representation of wisdom, knowledge, understanding, and a mouth speaking great things. Why? Because they say that they're the Most High, that they're Yahawah, that they're the Israelites, that they're the angels, and so on and so forth. And they talk major shit. So before we go into this next part here, let's go here. We already read that. Let's go to Daniel chapter 2 and 36. So it says the interpretation: Babylon, the first kingdom. See, Medio Persia and Greece, Rome. See how they break it down here as to who these empires are. It says Daniel 2:36. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art the king of kings, which we read in Daniel 7. That a man's heart was given to it. For the power of heaven hath given thee a kingdom. The power of heaven hath given thee a kingdom. Power and strength and glory. That's why you're ruling, pretty much. It says, and wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of heaven hath he given into thine hand. So the Lord gave him that power. Psalm 75, the promotion coming either from the east or the west or the south, but the Most High is the judge. He setteth up one and putteth down another. And the Most High is so bad and so powerful that he could set up the bases of men, a nobody, a filthy, dirty son of a gun, to be ruler over the world. Ain't that about something? A dirty, rotten scoundrel. And hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. Right, and gold is precious, because when you look at those empires, from the Job is an Israelite. I already see you coming a mile away, Joker. And the gold is the most precious out of these metals, and pretty much, that represented the splendor of Babylon. Now, all of the empires were great, but Babylon was the most splendid, but as you progress on, all of the different metals were lesser and lesser, but the lesser the metal, the stronger it is, until you reach iron, which is the strongest, and that was a representation of the Roman Empire. Medio Persia and Greece, and after these shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee. Right, that was silver, and another third kingdom of brass, which that represented the Greeks, which shall bear rule over all the earth. Why? Because they took over the known world at the time. Going all the way, back to when Alexander the Greek, yeah, right. Now, no Edomites have books in the Bible. Could. That's right. Because you already see the simplicity coming from 3 miles away. All right, so it says, and the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron. Boom. It says, that's a good scripture the brother put up, Daniel 4:17. It says, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things. Why? Because it's the strongest. And as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. Right, so it conquered and absorbed all of these empires into itself. That's why you had everyone paying tribute to Rome. And then you have in Acts, the 2nd chapter, it speaks about the Israelites that knew that they were Israelites coming from all of these different regions. And it spoke about all of those different regions. It spoke about, Persia, which it didn't, I don't believe it said Persia, but they came from all of those regions. all throughout Greece, all throughout Europe, from so-called Africa, out of, the Middle East, out of, the areas of, Persia, Iran, and those areas. Those are all Israelites that were living in those lands. And all of those different nations around there were in subjection under the Roman Empire. It says, and whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it the strength of iron. Right, and the 10 toes is a representation of the EU, once again, partly strong and partly weak, because financially there's some that are stronger and some that are weaker. For as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. Why? Because of their finances. It says, and whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. In other words, they're going to try to, keep themselves afloat, so to speak, for lack of better words, but they're not going to be able to. Why? Because the feet is a representation of the end of these empires. And this is a part of the crumbling, which is financially. Because if they're financially weak, they cannot pay their armies, their militaries, they cannot pay for their infrastructure, they cannot pay for anything to continue on. Hence, everything collapses within itself. And America, which is the modern day Rome, has influence financially over the whole world. But the whole world is seeing the deterioration of the money system of America, and they're choosing to get out of it, which is causing America to implode within itself even more. And these nations are pretty much holding America up because they have to trade right now their monetary units into American money, because that is the reserve world currency, or the world reserve currency. See? But that's why they're making different. They have something called the R5, which is the new monetary system that the BRICS nations are trying to set up. And the R5, the reason why they call it R5 is because all of those different 5 nations monetary system or money all starts with an R. You have Brazil, you have Russia, you have India, you have China, and you have South Africa. All right, and all of their money starts with an R. It says, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay, right? Because they're not going to be able to keep this thing afloat. Why? Because as it says here, the divine kingdom. And in the days of these kings shall the power of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever, right? And that's why you saw the stone, which the stone is a representation of Yahawah. For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great power hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. And the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. Right, because when we read back in Daniel 7, let me get also... I believe that's either Revelation 11. No, let me go to Revelation 14. Nope, that's not it. It is Revelation 11. Beautiful. All right, so going back to Daniel 7 and 9, this is after the 4 beasts, and this is after the second part of the 4th beast. I beheld till the thrones were cast down. What thrones? The thrones of these different nations. All right? They were cast down. Why? Because they were overthrown. And the Ancient of Days did sit. Who's the Ancient of Days? The Most High, whose garment was white as snow. He had on a white garment, and the hair of his head like the pure wool, not white. White, it's not just white, it's woolly. There says nothing here about white. The Ancient of Days, his hair of his head like the pure wool. Boom, the water, man. You brothers are too much, man. The name for the new reserve currency, R5 or R5 Plus, was based on the first letters of the BRICS currency, all of which begin with the letter R: Rial, Ruble, Rupee, Renminbi, and Rand. There you go, beautiful. Brothers got it. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as a burning fire that represents the chariots. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. This reminds me of Revelation 20, towards the end. The judgment was set and the books were open. Right, and we're witnessing now the books being open. Even Daniel said in Daniel the 9th chapter that he understood by books the number of the years that were, pronounced on Babylon in so many words. It says, I beheld then, because everything is predicated upon prophecy. That's why it says, wake not my love until he please. I beheld then because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake, which is who? America. I beheld even till the beast was slain and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame, because that's how this place is going out. Oh, look at that. All R5 currencies are backed by gold. Yeah, and that's why America don't want that. This is why they took out Saddam Hussein and they took out, Gaddafi. It says, I beheld even till the beast was slain and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. Meaning this is dealing with America, which is totally going to be taken out. And America's allies are going to be taken out. All right. The water, brother. I just clicked on that link. It says, as concerning the rest of the beasts, which is what? The other nations. They had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and time. Why? Because these other nations, outside of the Edomites, are going to continue to rule in the kingdom. Once they serve their captivity, they'll be able to be among themselves, rule among themselves, but they'll have to keep our laws, statutes, and commandments, and they'll still be tributary to us. And this is the point here. The Son of Man presented. I saw in the night vision, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven. This is Yahawah. The clouds represent the chariots, because this is at the end after, because when you take your enemies down, right? What's the next step after that? The next step after you take your enemies down, you go back and you divide the spoils. All the troops are called back, so all the chariots are going back, and victory, of course. It's a celebration, bitches. It's a celebration going on. Yep. That's another one. Yep. Well, two of the biggest oil-producing countries, Saudi Arabia and Iran, just made a treaty through China, which will also destroy the petrodollar. It says, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him, right? Because they presented Yahawah, the King of Kings, to the ultimate supreme power, Yahawah, and he's given them his flowers, so to speak. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom that all people and nations and languages should serve him. This goes hand in hand with Isaiah 2, Micah 4. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, because he's going to rule forever and forever and ever 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 and beyond. So back to the 17th verse, these great beasts which are four kings which shall arise out of the earth, but the saints of the Most High, the Israelites, you heard that vocab? The Israelites, the saints of the Most High, the separated ones, the consecrated ones, the holy ones, shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Jump down to the 27th verse, and the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, the Israelites, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominion shall serve and obey him. There's going to be slaves in the kingdom. Then from there we go to Revelation 11 and 15. And the seventh angel sounded, which is the seventh trump, at the end. And there were great voices in heaven saying, the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his anointed, and he shall reign forever and ever. And that's what we read, when Yahawah was being presented before the Most High Yahawah, in Daniel 7. So you see that all these precepts, they all come together. It's the same story told in different ways, using different symbolisms. And I remember when Apostle Tahar used to go through, the elder Apostle Tahar used to go through this, he used to tell us that High Priest Ariel would tell him that, the prophecies are the same thing, spoken over and over again, just using different symbolisms. All right? Let me read this precept the brother put up. Psalms 27:14. Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. I love this precept. Because it's like, when I first read it, right, years ago, it says, wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart, right? It says, did you already wait? And in my mind, that's the thought. Did you already wait? Wait, I say, on the Lord. So as you waited, still wait. Beautiful. And this is, these are comforting scriptures because this is what anchors us in place. This is what our hope is. Psalms 37:7, rest in the Lord, and Yahawah Bashem Yahushua, and wait patiently for him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospereth in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass. Beautiful. So with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. Till the next time I say, Shalom.